10 Secrets and Mysteries. In today's world, we have constant and instant access to an unbelievable amount of information. Information about anything and anyone. But some people's identity is hard to pin down. Using written and audiovisual sources, we've compiled the top 10 most intriguing stories about individuals throughout history whose identity was and remains a mystery. People without identity. 10. D.B. Cooper. November 24th, 1971. While the United States prepares for Thanksgiving Day, a Boeing 727 from Portland to Seattle is boarded by 36 passengers, including an inconspicuous man listed on the passenger manifest as Dan Cooper, later renamed by an overzealous journalist to D.B. Cooper. He seems polite, dignified, calm. Shortly after takeoff, the captain is informed by a stewardess that this man has a bomb in his suitcase and is threatening to use it unless he gets $200,000 in small bills and 4 parachutes. Although today it may seem unbelievable, Northwest Orient Airline and the FBI managed to make a deal, and the hijacker is met at a remote landing strip and receives the sum he demanded. After the passengers are released, he gives the flight crew very specific instructions. Keep the plane under 10,000 feet with wing flaps at 15 degrees. Once the plane is airborne again, he uses one of the parachutes at the minimum flight speed limit and disappears without a trace. After landing, the aircraft is thoroughly searched and an investigation spanning several years commences. The only clue the police have at their disposal is an identikit picture of Cooper, his fingerprints and a tie with a clip. All 10,000 $20 bills, photographed by the FBI before they were handed over to Cooper, are found in 3 bags in 1980 by the Columbia River. The FBI favors the theory that Cooper did not survive the drop, during which he tied the bags to his body. The body itself is nowhere to be found. The 30 years following this legendary hijacking, the FBI list of suspects runs into thousands.
Uncle LD was very injured, and heard them telling my father that they had hijacked an airplane.
There are dozens of theories as to who D.B. Cooper really was, and very little hard evidence to support any of them. What was his real name? Is he still alive? We'll probably never know. In 2016, the FBI closed the case as unresolved. 9. Isdal Woman. Near the Norwegian town of Bergen, there's a rocky valley called Isdalen, known also by some of locals as the Valley of Death. During the Middle Ages, many people came here to voluntarily end their lives. The body of the so-called Isdal Woman was discovered on November 29, 1970, by a hiker and his 2 daughters. The body was badly burned, and as was later discovered, lacked anything that could have led to its identification. A woman's watch and jewelry, most likely belonging to the victim, were placed close by in a manner suggesting a ritual execution. The autopsy showed that the cause of death was an overdose by prescription drugs, which were also found close to the body, and carbon monoxide poisoning caused by smoke and fumes. A successful fingerprint retrieval led the investigators to 2 suitcases stored at the railway station in Bergen. An extensive investigation revealed that the woman travelled under 8 different identities and spoke several languages fluently. Was she a spy whose cover had been blown, or who simply had to be got rid of? To this day, it's not clear what this unknown woman was doing in such a remote part of Norway. Neither the Norwegian police nor Interpol have come up with a satisfactory answer. In spite of all this, the Norwegian police have now decided to reopen the case after almost half a century. Forensic science has evolved considerably, and the Haukeland Hospital archives still hold parts of the woman's jaw and internal organs. By comparing the DNA findings with the International DNA Database, it might be possible to find close relatives and thus determine the mysterious woman's true identity. 8. Jack the Ripper. To this day, the identity of perhaps the most famous killer in the history of crime, Jack the Ripper, responsible for at least 5 deaths in the London neighbourhood of Whitechapel in 1888, remains a mystery. Since there is no doubt that the killer must have possessed considerable strength, criminologists agree that the murderer was most likely male. Furthermore, all victims were seen in the company of an unknown man. Although forensic science in the 19th century was still in its infancy, an examination of the bodies led to the clear conclusion that all the murders were committed by the same man. Jack the Ripper was possibly the first serial killer in history who did not dispose of the dead bodies, but instead publicly exhibited them. Since all his victims were prostitutes, there was a clear sexual subtext to the murders. In those days, the police were only able to convict a person by catching them in the act, or based on witness testimonies or direct physical evidence. Fingerprint analysis was barely a concept, while DNA testing was yet to make its appearance even in science fiction. Nevertheless, during the investigation and in the following decades, various different names were linked to the gruesome murders. The most convincing of them at the top of the list was one James Maybrick, whose diary contained entries that seemed to have been written by a serial killer.
The records show that he's very violent. The records show, for example, that his mother goes to kiss him when she's leaving, and he attempts to bite her face. He threatens to rip people apart and rip people open, and generally he would fit the bill of probably being homicidal.
Should we consider Jack the Ripper's case resolved, then? Hardly. In spite of the recent findings relating to the diary, it is still surrounded by too many unanswered questions. Seven. Agent 355. The American Revolution took place in the second half of the 18th century in the British colonies of North America. As a result, the United States declared their independence from Great Britain. Operating during this period was an agent known as Agent 355, an extremely capable woman whose identity remains an unresolved mystery to this day. In 1778, Benjamin Talmadge, the new intelligence chief of General George Washington, created a sophisticated spy network known as the Culper Ring. The network's confidentiality had to be maintained at the highest possible level. Not even General Washington himself wanted to know the names of its operatives. The Ring's agents developed sophisticated tools, such as messages written in invisible ink, in order to gather and deliver information whilst avoiding detection. Agent 355 was most likely a member of this network, which was primarily based in Long Island, New York. she was almost certainly a regular presence in the circle of Major John Andre, who was, at the time, Britain's chief intelligence officer. One theory would have us believe that after revealing the hostile intentions of Major Andre to the colonists, the agent was captured and incarcerated on a British prison ship. However, the existing records fail to mention the imprisonment of any woman during this time on a British ship. In an effort to discover who had so fundamentally influenced the espionage war during the American Revolution, historians sifted through 14,000 names in the British archives, unearthing clues as to the true identity of Agent 355. One name that came up was Lydia Darragh, a member of a loyalist family that supported the British position, who was also very close to the British administration and its representatives. This would make her an ideal candidate for the true identity of Agent 355. All of this is mere speculation. A good spy will leave behind little evidence, if any at all. So who really was Agent 355? Six. Tank Man. Events that took place on the 5th of June 1989 in the Chinese capital Beijing were soon broadcast around the whole world, and to this day have remained a symbol of personal courage and the struggle for freedom. All over China, late May and early June saw a wave of widespread unauthorized demonstrations and growing calls for democratization. But resistance to the authoritarian government was violently suppressed by the military. The crisis came to a head on the 3rd and 4th of June, when tanks entered Tiananmen Square and hundreds, if not thousands, were left dead or wounded. Around noon the following day, June 5th, a tank convoy drives past the area where people died the previous day. Suddenly, a lone man holding 2 shopping bags steps in front of the tanks and refuses to move. The first tank tries to get around him, but the man always moves into the path of the iron monster. Afterwards, he even climbs onto the tank and tries to talk to the tank crew. In the end, he gives up, climbs off the tank, and is dragged away by 3 men, out of view of the cameras. Who was this protester, whose courage surprised even the tank commander? The man, who's never been officially identified, most likely ended up in a Chinese prison. In 2004, a journalist from the Los Angeles Times tried to contact a British source who claimed that the tank man was a 19-year-old workman from Beijing named Wang Weilin. That particular investigation hit a dead end, however, as there was no solid evidence to back up this new claim. We can only hope that the tank man's identity will be revealed at some point in the future, when information is allowed to spread freely in Beijing, and the man himself, or someone who knew him, will step forward with the irrefutable truth. 5. Kaspar Hauser. One of the best-known cases of people without an identity is undoubtedly that of Kaspar Hauser. This young man, wearing badly torn clothes, was detained in a square in Nuremberg, Germany, on the 26th of May, 1828. In his hands, he clutched an envelope containing 2 letters. The first was addressed to Captain von Wessenig, the commander of a cavalry regiment, and contained a request to look after the young man. The second was allegedly written by the boy's mother, who wished him to follow in his late father's footsteps and join the army. When the boy was found, he was about 16 years old, and the only thing he could say or write was the name Kaspar Hauser. Many of those who examined these 2 letters believe that they were written by someone who had found the wandering boy and no longer had the means to support him. He recalled fragments of memories which he later wrote down as soon as he had learned to read and write. He claimed he'd been locked up in a dark room for many years and that someone had brought him food and water. Hauser's story caused a real sensation at the time, and massive popular interest ensured he made a pretty good living out of his own mystery, which was, of course, his obscure origins. But such popularity also had its disadvantages, as he was the victim of numerous assassination attempts. Sadly, in 1833, one such attempt proved fatal when he was stabbed to death by an unknown man. Hauser's grim fate only added to the mystery surrounding his life and the intense speculation about his true origins. One popular theory suggests that the young man was the legitimate but unwanted heir of a high-ranking German aristocrat, believed by some to be the Prince of Baden. Whatever the truth may be, he certainly accomplished what others can only dream of achieving, as Kaspar Hauser remains to this day one of the most iconic names associated with the city of Nuremberg. Four. The Green Children of Woolpit. The tale of the mysterious Green Children of Woolpit began in 1173 near the village of Woolpit, about 60 miles northwest of the city of London. Two twin children, a boy and a girl, suddenly appeared in the village dressed in clothes unknown at that time or in that area. Stranger still, they spoke in an unknown language and had an odd light green complexion. The villagers welcomed the children and tried to help them. The siblings were in very poor physical shape and refused to eat any food offered to them. Curiously, the only thing their stomachs could bear was green beans. Unfortunately, the boy did not survive this continual and inexplicable suffering. His sister, however, was more fortunate, and before long she recovered, gradually losing the greenish pallor of her skin. Where did the children come from? And why did their skin display that mysterious green tinge? One theory is that it was basically anemia, the so-called green illness in the Middle Ages, hence the legend of the green skin. According to another hypothesis, the children were actually wealthy orphans poisoned by their guardian, the Earl of Norfolk, who wanted to get his hands on the property they had inherited, leaving them to wander in the woods near Woolpit. But how would you explain the fact that the children did not understand English? And what about their bizarre and unfamiliar clothing? As you might expect, there was also a theory that the twins came from another planet. Such speculations are not a peculiarity of modern times. Already in the 17th century, the English intellectual elite began to reflect on the idea that we are not alone in the universe. The extraterrestrial theory was backed up by reported sightings of strange coloured lights moving through the sky in 1173, the same year the children turned up in Woolpit. A more down-to-earth explanation is based on the fact that during the 12th century, many Flemish immigrants arrived in eastern England. They were persecuted during the reign of Henry II, and many of them lost their lives at the Battle of Fornham in 1173. The twins might have been orphans who spoke Flemish and wore typical Flemish dress. The truth will probably never be known. Three. The Man in the Iron Mask. Who could resist being hypnotized by a mysterious face hidden behind an iron mask, or being intrigued by the secrets surrounding it? The story of the Man in the Iron Mask, an enigmatic prisoner whose identity was shrouded in mystery, was made famous chiefly thanks to Alexandre Dumas and his novel The Viscount of Bragelonne, 10 years later. In the novel, the mysterious prisoner was revealed to be a member of the royal family and the rightful, though undesirable, heir to the throne. Who was the man with the face no one was allowed to see and the name no one was allowed to speak? One theory, based on the serious study of historical sources, claims that the prisoner's real name was Eustache d'Auger. We know that a man of that name really did exist. He was the chamberlain of the extraordinarily powerful Cardinal Jules Mazarino, Prime Minister of France and the most influential man in the kingdom. Eustache d'Auger's identity as the man in the Iron Mask is, however, contradicted by a written imprisonment order from the court of the Marquis de Louvois, Louis XIV's Minister of State for War. In that document, it is quite obvious that the name of the prisoner was written in, probably later, in another hand. In one of the letters, the minister asked the king to punish an officer in the French army, one Vivien de Boulogne, who cravenly deserted his post during a military operation. The minister explicitly writes that he should only be allowed to leave the prison in a mask. Was the man in the Iron Mask truly an ordinary deserter? Unfortunately, the dates of his imprisonment are not available. The Bastille's most closely guarded secret still awaits a convincing answer. 2. The man from Taured. Strange as it may seem, our next mysterious and still unidentified person became mainly famous because of his place of origin, the only problem being that this place is to be found nowhere on Earth. In 1954, a bizarre and baffling incident took place at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. A middle-aged white male, dressed in European clothes, approaches the check-in counter. He presents the airline personnel with a very credible-looking passport. The only problem is, it was issued by a non-existent country called Taured. The staff ask him to show them his home country on the map. Without hesitation, the man points to the mountainous border region between France and Spain, just where the tiny principality of Andorra is situated. He speaks French to the airport officials and tries to convince them that there is no such place as Andorra in his home country, while Taured has a 1,000-year-long history. The most curious thing seems to be that the passport already contains several stamps, suggesting it has been used to visit Japan repeatedly in the past. Because he's now suspected of being a spy, the mysterious man has to undergo several hours of interrogation. When he complains of being tired, he is moved to a hotel, and a police guard is placed outside his room. In the morning, the policemen find that the man has disappeared without a trace, although there's no way he could have left by the door. Even more alarmingly, the man's passport, driver's license, and checkbook have disappeared from a locked room at the airport. Mystery lovers, however, seized on it as proof of the existence of parallel dimensions. According to them, the man from Taured, perhaps unwittingly, entered our dimension in 1954 and in some mysterious way returned to his own plane of existence, either on his own or with outside help. 1. Babuska Lady. The assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy on the 22nd of November 1963 was without a doubt one of the most momentous events in modern history. Everything that transpired in Dallas on that tragic day, and everything that was captured on photograph or film, has been subjected to minute analysis, and has given rise to countless conspiracy theories. Many of them include a woman known around the world as the Babuska Lady. The use of the Russian word babushka refers both to the possible involvement of the Russian Secret Service in the assassination and the particular headscarf the Babuska Lady is wearing, typical for older Russian women. She is clearly discernible in various amateur cine films, capturing the fateful November day on Dealey Plaza, standing on the grass between Main Street and Elm Street, holding a camera, or cine-camera, and recording the dramatic events. At the time, there were obviously no CCTV cameras, and because on most of the film footage and photographs her face is covered, it was not possible to compile a face composite.
Certainly, the shots came from more than one direction. There had to be a conspiracy.
Despite the efforts of both the FBI and private investigators to trace her, she never responded to their summons and never provided her pictures of the event. This only helped to fuel the curiosity surrounding her involvement. 7 years after the assassination, however, events take an unexpected turn. In 1970, a woman named Beverly Oliver goes public and claims to be the mysterious Babuska Lady. The public is obviously very keen to see what, if anything, she captured on film, but Beverly claims that her material has already been confiscated by 2 FBI agents. So who was the mysterious woman, really? Why has she never submitted her film to the authorities? What led her to react so differently from the other bystanders while filming that terrible scene? Was she a Soviet agent whose task was to document the assassination and then disappear without a trace?